Hi, I'm Megan Young, and this is It's a Journey, where I'm going to highlight different stories, real life people, from grief to career. So these first few episodes are going to focus on the grief journey, hoping that you can gather some tips, some likability of where you don't feel alone, because grief is a tough journey and so unpredictable. So come along with me as we dive into journeys that will hopefully give you inspiration. So let's start though with who you lost that was of significance, great significance to you, and how long ago that was.
Okay, so I lost my mom, and we're coming up on 6 years now. She passed away on March 23rd, 2015. She had MDS, which is a type of cancer of the bone marrow. So it happened very quickly.
And that time frame was a few months when you found out to when she passed. Is that right? Or
yes.
Okay.
So basically January 1st, 2015, life was completely normal. And she called me and said she had a weird rash on her leg. And that was how it all started. And then it just quickly progressed from there to her passing away on March 23rd. So it was like in a matter of 3 months, my entire world completely changed.
So I know that everyone has a connection with, either their guardian or their parent, but, explain your relationship with your mother and kind of what she's meant to you over the years.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it might sound cheesy, but she was my best friend. I mean, I feel like a lot of our personalities was similar, and we could just, talk for hours. And I always said she was my biggest fan. And I used to tell her, when I find somebody that loves me as much as you love me, that's the person I'm going to marry, because I don't think anyone will ever love me as much as you love me.
Yeah.
So it was a very good, deep relationship that I had with her.
So when you are looking back, when you remember the day, was it that you were at the hospital when you found out? Was it a call? What do you remember? Do you remember everything about that day?
What's weird is that I remember pieces of it, but I can't remember it as like a continuous memory, if that makes sense. And yes, I was at the hospital. We had actually decided the night before, my sister Rachel and I, that we were going to turn her machine off. So she had been sedated the week before, and we really hoped that they were going to be able to do some things that were going to, improve her quality of life. And her body just started shutting down when she was sedated. So my sister and I had kind of talked and decided, hey, if within this 24-hour period she doesn't start getting better and things kind of turn around, then we really need to have that conversation. So that's what we did the night before, and we decided that she wouldn't want to live that way. She was having to get dialysis, and even though she was sedated, you could see on the machines like her heart rate would rise, and it was just heartbreaking to see the discomfort that she was in. And I know that she wouldn't have wanted to live that way. And so we made that decision. And the next day, we called people that wanted to be at the hospital, close family and friends, to come up there. And then we had the machine turned off. And we knew it would be, I remember the nurses and doctors had told us, sometimes people can live for hours after this machine turns off, or even days. And she died within 8 minutes of us turning that machine off. And for me, that was, I guess, reassurance that she was ready. She was ready, and we made the right decision.
Yeah. So you have a sister who you're 3 years apart. Is that right? Or are you 2 years apart?
2 years apart. 2 years apart. So, 16 months to be exact. Okay. So almost 2 years, a little under.
Okay. And so, with siblings, with any family, but siblings in particular, when you have to make this extremely important decision, you know, who played what role, or what was the dynamic in for that decision? And then of course, after, when you had to make all the arrangements.
I mean, it really wasn't one of us taking the lead over the other. You know, in times of crisis like that, I think you really come together, at least we did, as a partnership, because that's such a big decision. I wouldn't think that I could lead that decision. That was definitely a 50-50 mutual thing that we had to talk about and discuss. And luckily, by the grace of God, I mean, we were on the same page with really everything. So even, you know, making the arrangements, that part, I have a memory of being at the funeral home, but that, other than that, it's kind of blurry. Like everything, it was like you're just in a whirlwind almost, and it's happening so fast and it's hard to remember. But yeah, I would say that my sister and I, we really worked well together through that.
Nice. Well, that, I feel that, you know, some families can have, there's a dynamic there that either works or doesn't. And I think that you were both raised in a way, yet so different, yet, but you have this kind of way of helping, and you both have that same heart of coming together when it is crisis, as you said. So during what I, you know, call the aftermath of everything, let's say the first, you know, year, how did you, it's done, the funeral's over, you know, you've laid your mom to rest, and she is now you're trying to pick up the pieces of your emotions and or having to work and kind of balance everything out. How did you react? What was this experience like for you after everything was settled?
So I guess my situation was unique in that my parents were divorced. So my mom and Nana actually lived in my childhood home. And, you know, my mom had lived there for 20 years. And so after the fact, we knew that we were going to have to sell that home because my sister and I couldn't afford to, you know, still be living on our own. We both had and we both had full-time jobs. It just financially, we weren't going to be able to keep the house. And my sister lives in North Carolina. So it was up to me to go through that house, room by room, item by item, and clear it out, do a garage sale, remodel the home. You know, it needed new carpet, new paint, things like that. Find a real estate agent, list the house. I mean, and these were all things that I had never done before. I hadn't bought a house. I hadn't sold a house. And I was navigating this, you know, essentially by myself. I had the support and help, you know, my dad helped some, and other people in my life helped, but, you know, it was hard doing that by myself. But I guess because I was doing it by myself, it kept me so busy. And it was such a distraction from grieving my mother, because she passed away. And then it was like, we have to do this now. And I was working a full-time job. And I remember I would go to work and then I would go to her house almost every single day during the week and get a little bit done, you know, wherever I could. And one thing I do remember, several people had told me, you know, there's estate companies that will clean out her house so you don't have to do that, because that's going to be really hard. And for me, there were so many things that I found when I was cleaning out her house, and I'm there by myself going through her closet, and something that, you know, a piece of paper that she had written the toast for my college graduation on. You know, a company going in and doing that, they're not going to find value in that. But there were so many things that I found that didn't have monetary value, but that had so much value to me, that I'm so glad, even though, yes, it was hard. It was really hard. But I'm glad I did it. And I always felt like I owed that much to my mom, because that was her life. And I'm not going to let somebody on the outside just come in and decide what's worth something and what's not. So back to your question about the aftermath, that's for the first, I mean, I think it took 9 months to sell the house from start to finish. So it was that time, it was just the task at hand, and I was busy.
Do you, now that when you once removed yourself from the busy, what happened? Was it instant, or did it progress with your grief, the emotion?
Oh, I feel like it was pretty instant.
Okay.
Like once I didn't have that project anymore, it was a hard rock bottom.
Yeah.
A really hard one, to the point where it was like, even a part of me didn't understand why it was so hard then, and feeling like this is harder now than it was a year ago, and not understanding that. So, yeah, I would definitely say it was like delayed grieving for me, because I had been so busy and so caught up in trying to get the house sold.
So I think that, you know, in my own grieving, if I look back, there's pieces of it that I could not believe either happened, I allowed happen, or, you know, just that surprised me. And it wasn't in a bad or good way necessarily, but there are things that really you don't realize that are happening, or decisions you're making, or, you know, people's reaction to it even. Was there anything that really just threw you for a loop, surprised you completely about grieving, and or, you know, how you were grieving around people?
I mean, I would say the biggest thing that surprised me was my own behavior, honestly. Looking back on it now, it doesn't even feel like I was the same person, with just habits that I was creating and choices I was making, people I was hanging around with. It just, you know, it wasn't healthy, but I also understand when I look back at it that I was just trying to survive.
Right.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know, hanging out with someone or drinking too much, you know, it felt good in the moment. And when you're so broken, it's like whatever's going to let you feel good for a second, you just long for that, because you are so broken and sad.
Yeah. What part, I know, I feel like a lot of people will either continue that, and that just becomes their life, because either something doesn't intervene, or they just don't have the strength, or even the resources, to be honest. I think the resources need to be available, you know, whether it be a good book or a therapist or something. But do you feel that there was something that intervened that you then moved on to that helped? Was there something that you can pinpoint in that time frame that really helped?
I would say therapy. I did start going to therapy because I just remember, not necessarily a moment, but I remember like a come to Jesus, like with myself, where I'm asking myself, like, who are you? What are you doing? You have got to get it together. And just feeling so weak. And so finally I did find a therapist, and that was really the beginning of me kind of crawling out of that hole. And that was probably, I would say 2 years after she died, that I really started working on that, and knowing that I couldn't continue living like I was living. I just couldn't. And the unique thing, or the interesting thing about therapy, I remember when I started going, I saw her once a week, and I would have this intense anxiety every time before I would get there, because it was like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, these are the things I don't want to talk about. It hurts. I don't want to remember these things. And when I would leave there, it was a physical exhaustion that I felt. I mean, where like I could just go home and go to sleep, because I was so exhausted from digging up and talking about all those feelings that I was so afraid to face and to talk about. And, you know, now I understand that that was so important for my healing process, is to face those things that are scary and talk about the things that you don't want to talk about, and revisit the memories that you don't want to revisit.
So do you think that, so the therapy, you went to therapy and then you had these moments, you kind of were able to decompress afterwards, and did it feel like a weight at least? Like it was really hard, it's always painful talking, and then at least some weight, almost like you were able to breathe better after the therapy? Or I know it was heavy, but do you feel like you at least were able to kind of speak your truth in ways?
Yes, and I think a big part of that was the understanding that I gained from therapy, and understanding why I was grieving this way, or why I was doing certain things, and just unpacking all of that and realizing things I didn't even realize were affecting me.
Right.
That were affecting me, and how I was grieving. So for me, I guess the understanding of it helped to lift that weight off of me.
Yeah. So now that you've been through some years, you've had the therapy helped you kind of move in a way that you could live and maybe see some happiness, or like feel or allow yourself to be happy. I mean, I think that we all are just kind of like, oh my gosh, that moment when you are happy and you're like, but should I be happy?
Right.
Do you feel that you're in a better place now, but are there triggers moving through your years and days that you feel come up often, less often?
I would say less often than they used to, and sometimes they surprise me.
Okay.
For example, my youngest son, 2 weeks ago, he was admitted to the hospital. He had something was going on with his heart.
Oh.
And I didn't realize the scale of what was happening until I got to the hospital, and they rushed him back, and he's in this intensive care unit, and I'm counting the nurses and doctors, and there's 11 of them in the room. And I'm hearing the beeping from that machine, just like from when my mom was in the hospital and she was in the ICU. And it was like this overwhelming sense of just feeling like I was going to crumble. And then because of COVID, of course, I was there by myself. So I had no support. And that was a trigger that surprised me and that I wasn't expecting, because of course, all my attention and my concern and worry is on my baby. And then as soon as I walked into that intensive care unit, it was like all these triggers just started going off for me. So that was one that surprised me, but they're definitely less now than they were at first.
And do you allow them to happen, and then you try, do you have a way now of getting yourself out of those kind of heavy states, or do you just like allow them to happen as they do?
I allow them to happen. It helps me to understand, I guess rationally in my mind, I can say, I know this is triggering me because XYZ.
Right.
And that understanding helps me. And really, I guess, mind control in a way, and just talking myself down and telling myself, in that case in particular, it was, hey, you got to get it together, because you got to be here for your baby right now. And like crumbling isn't an option right now.
Yeah.
So really just mental strength too, I would say.
So I feel like your story, I mean, honestly, you could, if you wanted to tell it in a, like there's dark, and then there's the light, and you have two babies now, you're a mother, you're just in a love that you really just enjoy, I feel, maybe feel understood in. And with that said, is there a message that you would want, or something that you wanted that everyone newly grieving to tell, or that would really, just from your own journey, knowing that?
Right. Definitely. I would say in the most simple way that you will be happy again. You will have complete happiness again. I remember after my mom died, I said, I'll never be able to be completely happy again, because every happy moment or milestone from here on out, it's going to be happy, but then it's always going to end with the sadness of wishing that she could be there. Mm-hmm. And that's how I looked at it for so long, and just thought I'll be able to feel happiness, but not like the full happiness. But I was wrong. And you will feel that again. And that's what I would encourage people newly grieving. As much as you don't see a way, you know, it really will come again, and you will feel happy again.
You know, it sounds, just by your journey alone, it sounds like it's a day by day. It's you making that effort. It's you showing up for yourself, because right. At the end of the day, you know, you have that power to navigate, and it doesn't feel great all the time, but I feel like you were very proactive in that. And sure, we can always say I always say that first year was a shit show for me, but right. Yeah. But I had the pleasure of knowing your mom, and she was such a beautiful person, and I am so grateful that I got to meet her and know just that dynamic, that then, you know, you grieving and your why she was here in your life is so big. And right. And I got to see that firsthand. So I thank you so much, yeah. Robyn, for sharing your story. And even though there's so much more we could share in this whole dynamic, but thank you so much for your time and sharing.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I really loved revisiting, you know, thinking about her and the good memories too. So I appreciate it. And if I can, you know, even help just one person get through their journey of grief, then I've done what I wanted to do. Awesome. So